Check out this gorgeous 30th Anniversary Gaggia. I mean, it's literally a work of art. But even the prettiest things can have dirty little secrets. And after 5 years, this beauty has some crusty surprises. So, today, we're tearing down one of the prettiest espresso machines ever made. We're going to give it the ultimate spot treatment, and I'm going to show you how to bulletproof it for the next decade. This 30th Anniversary Gaggia was made in 2021 to celebrate, obviously, 30 years of the Gaggia Classic Pro. The artist is Pierpaolo, and the design features what looks like kind of coffee-drinking harlequins, so pretty funky. Now, I'm an artist myself, and I love that Gaggia took the time to make this really special product. Gaggia is really unique, and not just for putting art on their machines. Their entire philosophy is just awesome. Simplicity, longevity, and repairability. Ideas that are pretty rare these days. And really, putting art on their machines is just an extension of their core ethos, and it's something worth celebrating. So I'm curious to see how a 5-year-old Gaggia is holding up. And while I won't be doing a complete teardown, I definitely want to get this boiler out so I can inspect it. While I'm removing these group head bolts, I do notice that staining. The seller thought it was just coffee, but it looks like it might be rust. And there are a couple of hurdles on this Gaggia that I wouldn't really see on an older Gaggia. It's actually a lot more difficult removing this PID sensor than it would be just removing a bruise sensor. And that's because the wire doesn't disconnect. But so you have to kind of twist it really out of shape. And the second is that this pump hose will not really disconnect easily. It's crimped on, so you actually need to remove the entire brass connector here. And that is the boiler out, so let's go ahead with the inspection. These M6 bolts that attach the boiler to the group head can be very stiff. The best way to get them out is with a 5mm hex bit socket. I linked one in the description because it's exactly the right length. You may also want new bolts if there's any signs of corrosion. Not too bad. It's impossible to know how often this machine was descaled, but for a 5-year-old machine, it looks pretty good. Hardly any scale. And I'll remove this steam thermostat. We don't need it since there's a PID controller. And this is just how easy it can be to remove the distributor as well. Sometimes you can get really stuck, in which case there is a hack to get it off, but this one came off pretty easily. The group head looks great. Just a few coffee stains around the side there. And I want to check the O-rings on the solenoid, so I'm removing that as well. One of the first signs of corrosion is the gasket being stuck to the boiler. And you can see this gasket is caked with scale. It's also hardened and flattened out a little bit. Now, I've seen way worse boilers, but this one needs some attention. So first is a mild descale, and that means very little citric acid, and a short 20-minute or so soak. And it's important to also descale the group head to get a good seal when we put it back together. The group head can withstand a much stronger descale, but it's not really needed in this case. I am paying special attention to make sure that the citric acid is dissolved. Otherwise, it can kind of cake in there, and it's pretty hard to get out. Just coming back to have a look at the boiler. You can see the reaction happening. You definitely do not want to leave this too long. And checking in on the group head, I'm adding a little more acid because the scale is still there. And if you're stressed out, I recommend taking a moment to watch the bubbles. And whenever there's any scale, really, I like to disassemble the solenoid. In this case, I needed the vise to break the solenoid apart. And it's worth repeating that these seals really should be made out of Viton. I ordered these in bulk, but I'm thinking about putting together a little O-ring kit. If that's something you'd be interested, let me know in the comments. The boiler is done soaking and it's looking good on the inside, but there's rubber stuck to the faces and still quite a bit of scale that I'll have to remove. The solenoid and group head are looking really good. As I said, the boiler is looking very good, but it still needs to be physically cured. So I'll start with scraping out any loose scale. There is a little ridge of aluminum here, a little defect probably, so we'll have to address that. And it's on to the steam wand. Getting the bolts out is pretty straightforward, but the wand itself is really stuck onto the boiler. But as you can see here, there was definitely a slow, long-term leak here. And remember, this is only 5 years old. The best way to loosen the wand is to tap it with the handle of a screwdriver or something like that. After that, you need to work it back and forth, and eventually it'll come out. Using a flathead or something like that to pry it out also helps. Now that the wand's off, I can see all the scale that built up, but also a brown substance, which is probably from the gasket. I'll just brush it clean, and then I'll throw the wand in with the descaler since there was scale pretty much everywhere else. And so it's on to the boiler lapping. Now I use my quartz countertop because it's the flattest surface that I have. I start with 220 grit sandpaper, and I just dunk both sides under the tap to wet it out. That's usually good enough for it to stay in place. I have never opened a boiler that didn't need to be lapped. Corrosion really only comes from descaling, so my guess is that over the years, if you aggressively descale, combined with the pressure in the system, some of that descaler makes its way past the gasket and probably stays there until it's done reacting. And that reaction is actually eating the aluminum, which is where the pitting comes from. My advice to anyone with an older gadget is take it easy on the descale and make sure you aren't pressurizing while you descale. So how far should you go with lapping? Basically, you want to get rid of any corrosion but the deep pits. And you don't want any corrosion extending to the bolt holes. And I'm showing you each stage here so you can see that the improvement near the end of this lapping process happens much faster. And it's looking good, so I'll finish up on the 400 grit sandpaper just to get rid of that kind of scuffing that I can see. And the sandpaper, I needed to tape the corners down to keep it flat. And that is about as good as I'm going to get it. And let's just really give this steam area here a good clean. And yeah, this boiler is almost as good as new. There was some coffee staining on the group head, and I'm using a little Kafitsa in hot water with a plastic brush to remove that. Kafitsa is very effective at getting rid of old coffee gunk. Link in the description. All right, let's get this group head back together. The Gaggia uses a standard E61 gasket. This is not the original gasket. It's actually an upgrade. It's silicone instead of rubber. So it'll work better and last longer. Link in the description. This is also not the original shower screen. It looks like an IMS shower screen, and it's not quite flush, the screw here, so I'm not that thrilled with this one. Comparing the 5-year-old boiler O-ring to the new one, the old one is hard and flat, crusted with scale. And I wasn't really happy with what I could find online until I measured and ordered bulk custom ones. Again, if you want a seal kit, let me know in the comments. And now I'm putting the boiler back together. Have a look at the gap created by a correctly sized O-ring. And I cannot recommend this 5mm hex bit socket enough. Good for getting the bolts out and for tightening them back up. As you can see, that O-ring gap is gone. Okay, time to put the solenoid back together and attach it to the boiler. I use Viton O-rings. Viton is superior in every way to silicone, but for some reason, most manufacturers continue to use silicone. And I'll just add a little silicone grease as well. So the steam valve is nice and clean, but have a look at the old O-ring. I had to measure and custom order the O-ring. And again, I'll use a little silicone grease. And I just want you to see that when I bolt the steam wand back on, I do it really carefully. Those bolt holes strip very easily. So now we come to a part of the repair I was not expecting. These spots here and here are actually rust. So I'm brushing on a little rust remover and I'm picking up drips so that that doesn't get on the clear coat. And then I'm going to use Scotch-Brite pads to get most of that rust off. I'm just scraping this last spot of rust off, and also I want to clear up the edge of the clear coat where it's kind of failing in these spots. And now it's time to sand it a little bit. I'm starting with 1000 grit, and I'm just focusing on the edges where the clear coat is peeling. And then I'll move to 3000 grit to make it a little bit smoother. If you're doing a deep clean, checking around these rubber feet is always a good idea. Right, I'm brushing on a new clear coat to make sure we don't see that rust again. And I'm using a Rust-Oleum clear coat, which comes from a spray can, which I spray into another container, and then I use a brush to apply. And I'm applying a few layers with a few minutes between layers. And after a half-hour cure, I come back to sand, first with 1000 grit, and then with wet 3000 grit. And that's all looking pretty good. There was also clear coat missing from this corner, and so I treated that part as well. All right, time to get this thing put back together. I'm pulling out the O-ring here on the water inlet for the group head, and I see signs of a slow leak. Again, these O-rings should not be made out of silicone. So after a light sand, I'll put in the new O-ring and bolt it back on the group head. Now this Gaggia was modified with a PID, and this is the sensor. Unlike the usual bruise sensor, this one does not disconnect, so I need to pre-wind the sensor so that when I screw it back on the boiler, it won't be all wound up. Reattaching the solenoid is a little tricky. I'm reaching through the lower hole here. And I'm just reattaching the fuse and the wiring as well as the solenoid tube and the inlet tube. These M5 bolts were in perfect condition. but they are the #1 bolt to be corroded. So if that happens to you, I've linked to the ones I usually use. Right, it's time to switch this baby on. I'll be monitoring with thermal camera while I show you the PID display. Now, you may be wondering if you should get a PID. That question is probably worthy of a whole video, but to summarize, they cost about $120, and they generally are a good investment for a couple of reasons. #1, they stabilize the machine. You'll see that little light blinking. That means it's sending heat to the boiler. So besides more consistent shots and adjustability, there's also a little less stress on the system from overshooting. And #2, steaming. And this is really the best thing about them. They dramatically improve your steaming experience. So if you're a milk person, I definitely recommend them. This is my first time with the PID Gaggia, so let's see how it goes. First, I'm going to make sure to fill the boiler as soon as I switch it on. We don't want to heat up a dry boiler. And of course, unique to the PID is that blinking light. It's blinking because rather than just turning the heater on full steam, it's turning it off, on and off, so it doesn't overshoot the temperature. I've gotten spoiled with this distributor. It's simple, adjustable, and effective. Check out that flat top. Link in the description. Yeah. A little on the hot side, but that'll do. All right, I'm going to save that for the cappuccino. All right, we have given this machine the full beauty spa treatment. She's had the hot water descale. She's had the manual boiler lapping and the Viton Seal massage. And now she's just as pretty on the inside as she is on the outside. And as satisfying as it is tearing these machines down and getting them back to brand new, it's even more satisfying taking a machine that probably would have been thrown in the trash. Now, if you caught my last video, you know I've started my DIY micro factory. And in the next video, I'm going to be sandblasting a rusted out 2001 Gaggia. See if I can't bring it back to life with a fresh powder coat. So if you want to see that, make sure you hit that subscribe button and tell me, what do you think? Should this be my new daily driver, or is she a little too precious for that? Let me know in the comments. All right, I'm going to leave you with me making that cappuccino. I'll see you in the next one.